We got 9 films and 2 actors and 1 ranking. Let's slice this thing open. It's prime time, bitch. Coming in dead last at number 9 is Freddy from Freddys Dead. Freddy in this doesn't just jump the shark, but he jumps that shark right off of a fucking cliff. Gone is the sinister trickster from the earlier films, replaced now by a Saturday morning cartoon clown.
No screaming while the bus is in motion!
In this Batman and Robin installment of Freddy, a clear emphasis was made on ramping up the humor versus the scares.
How about this, Doc?
And yes, Freddy as a character has always been on the slightly comedic side of horror, but here they just turn that dial to 11 and then just break it off. And in doing so, it makes the jokes more eye-rolling and cringy than it does funny.
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little soul, too!
No, don't like that.
And don't even get me started on the makeup. Over the series, there's been a gradual deterioration of the quality of Freddy's makeup. But in Freddys Dead, it's like they just stopped giving a fuck. I mean, just look at it. It looks like they stretched bubblegum across Robert Englund's face and called it a day. Freddy in Freddys Dead marks the absolute low point for the character in the series, and it became the funny, not funny death rattle of the character as we knew it.
Oh, yeah.
Numero 8 is Freddy from Dream Child. If Freddy in Freddys Dead was like Batman and Robin, then Freddy in Dream Child is like Batman Forever. Dream Child Freddy really marks the beginning of the downward spiral of the character. By this point in the series, he had become a pop cultural icon known for humorously dispatching his victims in creative ways, and instead of showing a little bit of restraint, the filmmakers just opened up the throttle on that humor train. I mean, the humor got so bad that at this point, they should have just renamed Freddy the Punisher.
It's a boy! Back here, Dan. Better not dream and drive. You are what you eat.
The fans expected the funny, and the filmmakers gave it to them, like giving a fat kid the keys to a chocolate factory. But instead of getting an awesome sugar high, all they got was diabetes. And trust me, I know all about that. I mean, look at me.
Diabetes.
But I will say that Freddy doesn't go completely off the rails here. Even though he is teetering precariously close to tipping over that edge, there are still faint echoes of the earlier Freddy scattered in little bits and pieces throughout this movie. But you can also see that the writing is on the wall and they are hurtling headlong towards the point of no return.
School's out, Krueger.
Coming in at 7 is Freddy from the 2010 remake. Now, I don't want to shit all over Jackie Earle Haley or his performance as Freddy necessarily in the remake, because you can only do so much with what you're given as an actor. But on the whole, his performance was just okay. But his Freddy just lacks that personality that Robert Englund's Freddy had. And that to me is the biggest drawback to him. He's just very dull. And even Haley's delivery on the one-liners is just very flat and dry.
We got 6 more minutes to play.
Like, in comparison, I picture Robert giving some of those same lines a lot more oomph. And I get this is an attempt to try to take the character back to his roots, like try to make him more scary like he was in the original. But even then, he still had kind of a sadistic charm to him. Jackie Earle Haley's Freddy really lacks all of that. And whenever he speaks, he comes across sounding like Christian Bale's Batman.
You can't save her! Where are they? Answer me! No. Where are they? Look at me! Where to me?
And, once again, the makeup is shit. Now I know a lot of you are going to sit there and go, well, the makeup was meant to look realistic, like a real burn victim. I don't care. It still looks stupid.
You think you could turn back time?
And that marks the end of the portion of this ranking with the Freddys that I genuinely dislike. From here on out, I like all the Freddys, but to just varying degrees. Number 6 is Freddy from Dream Master.
Well, it ain't Dr. Seuss.
Freddy in this film is a bit of a mixed bag. I mean, you can kind of see the beginnings of where they would eventually flush this character to, but I still think there's a good enough holdover from Dream Warriors. A lot of people will say Freddy here in Dream Master really marked the beginning of the end of the character in the original series. And well, yes, he's a little bit more comical than he had been in the previous 3 films. There is still a scary menace to him. He hasn't yet turned that corner of just being a party clown like he would eventually be in the next 2 films. Plus, once again, Robert is fantastic. He's still scary and menacing, even if he's ramping up that one-liner quota just a little bit.
How's this for a wet dream?
And not to mention, the kills in this movie are collectively some of the best in the entire franchise. Well, maybe except for the invisible karate scene.
You flunked.
But other than the slight uptick in the comedian department, the one real drawback I have with this Freddy is ultimately the way he's killed. Coming off the original Nightmare on Elm Street and Dream Warriors, where they had to go through these elaborate steps in order to defeat Krueger, simply killing him in this movie by making him look at his own reflection is pretty f***ing weak.
That's stupid. That don't make no sense.
But I will say this, the sight of Freddy being killed and ripped apart from the inside is pretty f***ing awesome. So I guess you just gotta kind of take the good with the bad on this one.
I'll see you in hell.
Tell him Freddy sent you.
Coming in at 5 is Freddy from New Nightmare. You could almost call this the pseudo Roy Burns of the Nightmare franchise because technically this isn't even Freddy. Oh, Roy, really? A lot of people will say that Freddy in New Nightmare is a return to how he was in the original. But I actually feel like Freddy in New Nightmare leans a little bit more towards the Freddy from Nightmare 2. And plus, I've always liked the look of Freddy in the trench coat. And even the look of his not gloved razor hand. I mean, Nightmare Part 2, anyone? But the makeup at times does look a little too Halloween mask fake. But it doesn't really bother me that much. And definitely not as much as the makeup in some of the other entries. Even though I do love this version of Freddy, he sits here at number 5 because, like I said before, technically it's not Freddy. It's a demon of sorts that's using the look of Freddy in order to murder people in the real world. And I know it's really splitting hairs on that issue, but I'll take non-Freddy demon thing, whatever he is, over any of the Freddys at the bottom of this list.
Hello?
And his name is John C.
Coming in at number 4 is Freddy from Freddy vs. Jason. After almost a decade, man was it good to see Robert back. Freddy in Freddy vs. Jason was a return to form. He wasn't the annoying party clown from Freddys Dead, nor was he really the evil demonic serious Freddy from New Nightmare. This really felt like more of an extension from Dream Master and Dream Warriors, in my opinion at least. And after nearly a decade, Robert Englund slips right back into that glove with such ease as if no time has passed at all.
The only thing to fear is fear himself.
The only thing to me that really looks silly is by the end of this, he kind of looks like Rey Mysterio trying to chop down the Big Show.
Out of nowhere, it's a Curry. No, I got a 619 connects.
But I do like the idea of Freddy being a master manipulator and pulling the puppet strings on everything that's going on in this movie, even if it feels like it comes off as a bit of a detriment to Jason. But I already went over all that in my Jason ranking. This is about Freddy, and Freddy in Freddy vs. Jason is awesome, and it was well worth the almost decade wait to see Robert back in the role. I just wish I could be as enthusiastic about his counterpart in the movie.
It's not my fault this bitch is dead on her feet.
Cracking my top 3 at number 3 is Freddy from Freddys Revenge. I gotta say, the film is aptly titled because Freddy is fucking ruthless in this movie. The dark comedic personality from the original takes a back seat to a more menacing and sadistic turn of the character. This is arguably Freddy at his scariest and darkest.
You've got the body. I've got the brain.
And even though I love me some dark Freddy, I feel like they went just a tad too far. And by doing so, we lose some of what makes Freddy who he is and what we've come to expect. But at the same time, I think that's why I like this version of Freddy so much. It just feels really different from any other version of the character in the rest of the series.
You are all my children now.
But I do have two major drawbacks with this Freddy, and you can call them nitpicky, but whatever. Number one, I'm not a big fan of him being killed by love. It's something that just comes completely out of nowhere and feels like a cheap way out because they really didn't know how to end this movie. Number two, and this may be petty of me, but it's the one scene where it's clearly not Robert Englund as Freddy. And this is because at the time, they didn't want to pay him to reprise his role, so they just stuck in some random stuntman thinking that that would be good enough. And the result is really, really terrible looking. You know, this isn't Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees where you could stick a random guy behind a mask and it doesn't really matter. Robert is Freddy, and so much of that character is Robert himself and the little nuances he brings to that performance. Thankfully though, they learned their lesson and got Robert back for the rest of the film, but still, maybe reshoot this scene? And that's really it. If it wasn't for those two little nitpicky details and maybe just a tad bit more humor, who knows, this Freddy could have been number one on my list. Coming in at number 2 is Freddy from the original Nightmare on Elm Street. It's the one that started it all, and it's what made Freddy Krueger a household name. In a world of faceless mask-wearing horror heavies, Freddy Krueger brought something unique to the slasher genre, and that was his dark comedic personality. And it really helped set Nightmare on Elm Street apart from a very crowded slasher genre in the mid-80s.
Come to Freddy.
I know to a lot of people, the original Freddy is their number one, but for me, as great as he is, I just don't feel like his personality is completely fleshed out yet. At least not enough for my own personal liking.
Help me, please. Save me from
Freddy.
But all the hallmarks are there, and Freddy in the original Nightmare on Elm Street laid the groundwork for the rest of the franchise going forward. And even though this Freddy isn't at the top of my list, my top choice does stand on the shoulders of the greatness of the original. So that means coming in at number 1 is Freddy from Dream Warriors. What else can I say? He sits at number 1 for a reason, because in my opinion, this Freddy is the absolute best. Like I said in my top 10 kills video, I truly believe that this is the pinnacle of Freddy Krueger. This is the perfect combination of that dark humor and the sinisterness that we come to love from Freddy. In one scene he can make you laugh, and in the very next scene he could just scare the shit out of you. There's just absolutely nothing negative I can say about this version. After the extremely dark turn from Nightmare 2, the writers here took Freddy back to the formula from the original, but this time they gave Robert a lot more room to play around in the role and inject more of his personality into the character and truly make it his own. And boy does he ever.
What's wrong, Joey? Feeling tongue-tied? I said, where's the fucking bourbon? What's the prime time, bitch?
Let's get high.
It just goes without saying that Robert Englund hit a grand slam home run in Dream Warriors. And it's not to take anything away from his other performances as Freddy in the other films, because he brings it in each movie he's in. But with this performance, it was just the perfect storm of humor and scare, and the movie itself is awesome, and that is why Freddy from Dream Warriors sits at number 1 on my list. Well, that was it for my ranking. I'm sure I've probably pissed a lot of you off, but maybe there's a lot of you out there that agree with me. What are your rankings? Please post them in the comments below. As always, like, comment, and subscribe. Adios, and GTFO! Freddy in this doesn't just jump the shark, but he jumps that shark right off of a... And I get that this... And I get that this is an attempt to take the character back to his roots. And I get this is an attempt to try to take the character back to his horror. And I understand this is an attempt to try to... Damn it! And even though I love me some Dark Freddy, I think they went just a tad too far. And this was because at the time, they didn't want to... And this was because at the time, the studio didn't want to pay him to reprise his role. So they just stuck in... Stuck? What the f*** is stuck? I always do this. Ready about to record, and then I just blank.